Jake Stuart with the National Sports Media Association, and today I am joined by an Iowa legend, Sportscaster of the Year for the year of 2021, Keith Murphy. Keith, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here. I'm a big fan of the NSMA, so anything you need, glad to do it.
Well, first off, Keith, this is your fifth award from the National Sports Media Association. Does this one feel as good as the first one?
It really does. It does. They all feel nice, and you don't ever know if you're actually deserving. And certainly, I don't think there's an objective way to say this guy has earned it more than this guy or this gal. It's just nice, and it's probably, to be honest, more likely that you might be rewarded by your peers as you get older and you've been in it longer. That's kind of just the way it goes, and I recognize that. But it's always nice to have somebody who works in your industry just say, "Hey, we appreciate what you're doing," but I don't take it for granted, and I also don't sit there and think, "Oh, this means I am the best." And it's nice to be recognized, and I really appreciate it.
Keith, you spent over 25 years with Who TV, Channel 13. Obviously, very recognizable name in the state of Iowa. Reading your bio, I had a good laugh as well. I'm curious, though, before getting into the news world, what brought you into the industry and what made you want to work in sports?
I played sports my whole life. I played 4 sports in high school, and I briefly played football in college. Mostly was a tackling dummy at that point in my career, my freshman year, and I got knocked out by injuries and just wanted to stay in it. And I don't know why. This was, before ESPN and the explosion of cable and all the different sports media. It hadn't really occurred to me growing up that I could be a sportscaster. I didn't really think of it. I'm not sure why, because like many people, I was the kid calling his own play-by-play in the driveway. I'd watch TV and talk along with it. I knew all the broadcasters. When I was in high school one time and I saw the local sportscaster in person, I was just in awe of him, because I watched him all the time. I couldn't believe I was seeing him. And I think I tried to tell him how much I liked him, and it came out, "You're good. I like in sports, and you watching TV, and nice you met me." It was a disaster. So I'd always looked up to the industry, but it just hadn't really occurred to me. And somebody at school said, "Hey, they need somebody to help with the college campus television station, the play-by-play for the games. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Yeah, I would love to do that." And first time I did it, I was terrible, but I changed my major that week. I was like, "Gosh, this is what I want to do." And from that time on, just any opportunity I got, basketball, baseball, football, any games I could call, I just signed up. The campus television station newscast, and I won't watch them now. They're on tape somewhere in this house, but I'd lose all confidence if I was reminded how bad I was.
Now, Keith, who were some of the sportscasters that got you, into and involved in sports broadcasting? Who were some of your inspirations growing up?
Well, a big one for me was Jim McKay, who oversaw the Olympics primarily in Wide World of Sports. It's long before you were around to watch television, but Wide World of Sports was kind of appointment television, and Jim McKay just had this incredible presence over the Olympics when everyone was watching the Olympics. And as a kid, Monday Night Football was gather around your television, and Howard Cosell was like the love him or hate him figure, but everybody had an opinion on Cosell. So those guys, for sure. Also like Dick Enberg, Kurt Gowdy, some of the voices of my childhood. You can just hear them. Keith Jackson for college football. You just heard those voices and you knew it was a big game. And there's still that to some extent. It's just when I grew up, there were 3 channels. I mean, there were 3 networks. So if you were on one of them, you were exposed to a lot of people. Now, of course, there's so many competing voices that they switch networks, like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman just went from #1 team at Fox over to Monday Night Football. That kind of thing didn't really used to happen. It's just it's a new world, and there's more jobs out there for sportscasters, which is great.
Well, Keith, you've served as Iowa State's play-by-play way back when, and now you're mostly primarily covering sports news. Can you tell our listeners about maybe a game you've been able to cover or a sporting event that really stands out to you, one that really just hits the mark for you?
Oh, yeah, there are two come to mind right away, and I guess that's the best way to answer something like this is what's the first thing that popped in my head. One was the Cap One Bowl and what was Nick Saban's final game as the LSU head coach. It was pretty much known he was going to go to the Dolphins after that, and they were the defending national champions, just a loaded team, and they're playing the Hawkeyes. So I was there in Orlando covering the Hawkeyes, and Iowa needed to call a timeout to stop the clock and didn't. So the clock was winding down. And on the final play of the game, through like a Hail Mary pass, Drew Tate to Holloway, and it ended on the final play. And it was just chaos. It was one of those times, I'm sure you've seen these games where everybody on the side of the team you're covering thinks it's a loss and they're down, and then suddenly in one split second, that magic of sports, the reason we love it, it's unscripted. Yep. You don't know what's going to happen. It's the ultimate reality TV. Everybody explodes and everyone's mood changes on both sides. So there was that. And then here in Iowa, we haven't had a Final Four men's team since 1980. And in 2000, the Cyclones and Michigan State Spartans were kind of thought to be the two best teams in the tournament, but they were 1 and 2 seeds, and they met in Auburn Hills, and Iowa State. And the national narrative was whoever wins this game is going to win the national championship, and that is what ended up happening. But the Cyclones had a chance to go to the Final Four, which is rare for this state. As I said, the last one remains 1980 when the Hawkeyes were there. But Iowa State had a 5-point lead with about 5 minutes to go and never scored again. And Larry Eustace, the head coach, had a meltdown on the court. He was ejected from the game. There was a controversial double foul call. It was just chaotic. And to this day, Cyclone fans still talk about that finish. So when you're there for something like that, you never forget it. Sometimes it's joyful, and in the case of the Cyclones, painful.
Well, I love how quickly, those two events came to mind for you. Clearly they, are very important and really stand out. I want to know, Keith, from a news perspective, how much did your work change as a result of COVID?
It changed a lot. Our goal at the television station was to never have the sportscast leave the program, leave the newscast, because many stations, including some here in Iowa, they stopped doing sportscasts because there were no sports going on, and we understood that. So what we did is try to turn the negative into a positive, and we did a couple of things. One was we went out and did real out-of-the-box features you don't normally have a time for. Mark Freund and John Sears, two of the reporters that work with me, stuff like people on unicycles or disc golf. It tended to be outdoor sports, and the interviews were sometimes done 10 feet away, but they were outdoor activities we just usually don't get to. And they ended up being some fascinating stories. And then the other things we did, we held tournaments that the best moment in Iowa sports history, the best sports figure in the state of Iowa history. And we had a vote each night. We'd play a little video from each side, and then whoever won the popular vote would advance in the tournament. And the one misfire, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do it. We also had a tournament of gut punches. And as somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight, I forget how visceral it is for fans, even, 20, 22 years later when something painful has happened. So we ended up getting a lot of mail of like, hey, it's already bad enough in the pandemic. You got to have this tournament that reminds me of like the worst moment of my sports life. And the winner of that tournament, by the way, was Iowa State's loss to Michigan State in that game where the meltdown happened and the coach was ejected. that won the tournament. But if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't do that, because it wasn't a time to be reminded of negative things. But out of that, some of those emails, we started to have this thing called positivity. And then it was just, we asked viewers for just positive videos of something positive coming out of the pandemic. And it might be a dad who is playing wiffle ball in the backyard with his son and daughter when normally he'd be at work at the office. And, you know, some of it was like fraternity guys setting up these crazy mazes of, you know, like Dude Perfect type setups in their fraternity house where the golf ball would go all through the house and then into the hole. So we started asking for those videos, and they came pouring in. And when all was said and done, we didn't ever have the sportscast removed from the newscast. And it was just a reminder of you don't have to let format dictate content. You know, you can sometimes find something just because you're asked to not think of it in the same template kind of way, like we tend to do sometimes, like news, commercial break, news, commercial break, weather, commercial break, sports. Yeah, there's no formula you have to follow. We probably could all use more of that. I know I need to think like that more.
Right. No, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's a narrative too that's been followed by a lot of our winners, and they've addressed that in a similar way, saying, you know, we've had to be more creative, especially you know, following just how difficult it was, and without live sports, and how challenging that was. Hey, Keith, last question for you, and thanks so much for being here. What advice do you have for sportscasters just looking to get into the industry, whether in news or in sports?
I think the most important thing is to not do an imitation of somebody else. You know, we all have influences, but you have to find your own voice. And sometimes it can take a while, and sometimes it can take, you know, failure, but you have to find what works for you. Like I tell our interns, like, don't come in here and, you know, try to be me or Andy Fales or John Sears, one of the guys that I work with. Just find your own voice. Like if there's some things I do that you think, oh, that works for me too, fine, use it. But if there's some things that don't fit your personality or your approach, don't do that. And I know sometimes people tell you, you know, you have to practice going to your left. You know, don't just go your dominant hand. You know, practice hours on end going to your left. My opinion is, find what's really good and strong and lean into that. Forget about spending countless hours trying to get better at the thing you're not naturally gifted at. If you're a great play-by-play person, just go in that direction. If interviewing is your skill, lean into that. Keep going to your right. If being funny, if you're truly funny and you don't have to force it, then maybe that Kenny Mayne type direction, that's the direction you should go in. But if you're not funny, don't go over here going to your left over and over again, trying to be funny, because you're probably never going to be naturally funny. So don't force it. So find what you're good at. Like Andy Fales, I work with, fantastic writer. And when he first joined when he first joined us, he was kind of doing a vanilla sportscast. I was like, you need to take the personality you have in the newsroom and some of these incredibly witty things you say and clever things you say. And, you know, his emails were like appointment reading for me, because like, God, this guy can really write. So I was like, lean into that, you know, that satirical and clever and that voice you have, bring it to the screen. And that helped end up creating this franchise he's been doing for 20 years called What's Bugging Andy. It was just born out of, on Sundays, he would come in to the sports office and he would always have this funny rant about something that annoyed him. You know, it could be the guy at the bar that, you know, just couldn't help but talk really loud so the women could overhear his most recent accomplishments. You know, just, you didn't know what it was. It could be bad drivers, but he would do it for our amusement. And I was like, this is great. Take some of this to the air. And he does it 50 weeks a year now. What's Bugging
Wow.
Andy? It's just what he used to come in and say. So that's an example of, you know, my encouragement is just lean into what you're good at, because it's hard to be good at everything. So I don't look at this as like basketball where you have to go to your left sometimes. Find what you're good at. And sometimes you need a mentor to help tell you what you're good at, and then lean into that and see if you can make a career out of it.
I love that. Pursue your strengths, and I think that that's fantastic advice from a guy that has done it all. 5-time Sportscaster of the Year from the National Sports Media Association. Congratulations on another award, Keith, and we hope to see you in Winston this summer.
I'll be there. I don't miss it because it's a great time, and the people are so nice. It's a fantastic event. Anybody who wins in Iowa, I always contact them. Like Mark Woodley last year, my friend at KWWL, he won. I was like, Mark, you got to go. If you can go, you got to go. Because two things, you're going to have a blast. It's so well run. There's so much to do. But most importantly for me, as a guy who's been in the game a long time and has seen, we're all facing these challenges of media changing all the time. I come out of there reinvigorated. It's like it reminds you of why you got in the business when you go to the weekend. So anybody that can go, you won't regret it. I'm just glad to be invited, and it's a privilege to be there. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Look forward to meeting you in person, Keith. Thank you so much.
We'll do it. Thanks.